Okay, so the purpose of this video is to show a simple way to make shide. These are these paper streamers you see here. But to do that, I want to first talk about like why I've chosen to employ them. As taiko players, I think it's important for us to be thoughtful of the traditions or the imagery we're using when we're playing taiko, and not to just try to look Japanese, right? So I want to give some explanation on that. So first of all, these shide, these paper streamers, when they're hung from a rope like this, it's called shimenawa, and this is used to demarcate the boundaries of a sacred place, like a jinja, for instance. Actually, in the story of Amaterasu in the cave, the one that a lot of taiko players know, where Amaterasu comes out when Uzume dances on a barrel, Amaterasu is prevented from re-entering the cave by one of these shimenawa. So there's kind of that actually interesting history to taiko mythology as well, but that's really not the reason I'm employing it. And I want to tell you a couple stories actually, and I want to tell them in the forms of two lessons that I've learned from Tiffany Tamaribuchi sensei, odaiko champion, someone I've taken workshops with through Bakatsu Taikodan and our workshops with her, as well as the Reimagining Taiko series that was hosted by Unit Souzou. It was kind of a taiko community response to the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020, seeing how we as taiko community could work towards anti-racist practice and solidarity building. Okay, so those are some of my interactions with Tiffany Sensei, which I want to tell some stories because she's just always a fountain of wisdom. One thing she told us, first of all, when we took odaiko workshops with her, is we had this pretty short odaiko stand at the time, and for some of the taller members it was a bit of a challenge to play. And I'd previously heard Tiffany Sensei told stories of when she was in Japan working. There was a time when a family asked her to play a family heirloom drum, which was a lot smaller than like a odaiko that she would perform on. But the challenge then was, to make the drum as big as it was in the moment, to make it seem like if it's like, the biggest, most important drum in the world. So that was kind of a performative challenge on her part as a player to make that reality happen. So, but with that in mind, I asked Tiffany Sensei, what should we do for our tall players? And she said, make a new stand. And it was like, boom, right? Obviously, right? So when the music's not doing something that you need it to, right? Or world's not working the way you think it should, change the system, right? Make the stand that you need to do what you need to do. So in making the stand, I not only wanted to make one that's taller, it's like I wanted to make a stand that also carried those other values of what I think taiko is or could be. So that kind of inspired this design here too. So which leads me to the second kind of lesson from Tiffany Sensei, that she told our group that to play as if it's necessary for the sun to rise. That when taiko is used ritually in Japan in a lot of kind of context ethnographically or kind of local festivals and rituals, it has these very specific and meaningful purposes that have a immediate and active effect on the world. It's not just music for music's sake. It's music so that the sun can rise, or dance so that the evil that accumulates over the year in the house can cross the threshold and be and then leave, right? So that we can have renew the world again, right? So in that context too, as taiko players, sometimes when we're just playing as like, we're playing on the stage, it's music just for people to hear, right? And we lose some of those kind of special meanings behind taiko. It becomes a little unmoored from that kind of like play as if it matters, right? And so that's the other kind of thing that I want to kind of evoke with these two, is that one, I guess putting those two lessons together, that if these shimenawa are boundaries of sacred spaces, and taiko, sometimes we say that you're a performer from the moment you step on the stage until it's all finished, right? Transitions, drum movements, through it all. And when you're backstage waiting for someone, you're still kiaing, you're still there, you're present, right? And so when we enter a performance, right, we're entering this kind of sacred space that we're all together making music. We're all like experiencing the same thing. We're all willing to listen and react and be together, right? So that's one reason why I think it's kind of a nice, meaningful symbol. Another reason too, I think, is just to kind of play as if it matters, right? Like if it's going to make the sunrise, maybe that's not what we think, but I do think as North American taiko players, we should play, taiko as it matters to us, right? That maybe it's that the sun rises, maybe it's that, for the liberation of all beings, maybe it's just so that we can be real with each other, right? Share something kind of authentic, right? So, play as if that matters. And I think that's kind of the other kind of meaning I have behind this. I guess in terms of, I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, this comes from Shinto traditions, right? Kind of indigenous religion of Japan, which did come with early Japanese American immigrants to Hawaii and the mainland United States. But during World War II, there was destruction of shrines and material culture. Some of those practices are, still around in custom, but not necessarily in kind of organized religion. Some Shinto ritual was adopted into Buddhism, actually, as a result of this kind of wartime smashing out of Shintoism, but also the social pressure for Japanese Americans to distance themselves from Japan, prior to the war and after the war as well. So kind of these different forces, some violent and some kind of social pressure to abandon some of these customs. I'll give a little personal history as well. My great grandmother Kishinowada was known as kind of a magical or spiritual healer. She practiced jore, or a type of healing hand kind of technique. She was living in Japan during the war in Wakayama-ken, where the sky glowed red from the fire bombings, and was later reunited with her son, my grandfather, he was an interpreter during the surrender ceremonies. He was MIS, Kibe, part of the U.S. Army, was able to slip a note to an enemy sailor, right, who somehow got that back to her, and they were able to reconnect. But throughout her life, she lived this liminal existence between two countries, between the spirit realm and the material one as well. And when my uncle was drafted to the Vietnam War, she gave up eating meat. And sure enough, he was stationed with NATO forces in Germany. So someone who just lived this life that was, magical. Had these, just different types of experiences too, right? Which is also kind of part of this Japanese American experience, which is maybe not always as emphasized. So that's why, by using this imagery, what I'm hoping to carry out is, that these are sacred spaces. Our communities are sacred spaces. Our music is sacred space, right? Being in connection with each other is sacred space. So that's the purpose of this. So I think if you're interested in kind of exploring some of those customs, you might consider the kind of a ritual washing. Before you go to a shrine in Japan, for instance, right? You wash your hands, your mouth with water first, and then. But I think the really important thing is just make them with a good intention, right? And then for my teammates, we will string these all up on the float this weekend, and it'll be a real fun time, I think. So. So what proceeds now is actually teaching how to make it, which is not that long. Okay, we're going to need a paper, a printer paper will do. We'll need a cutting tool, a measuring tool, and a marking tool. We're going to take our paper and fold it on the short axis into quarters. And on each of these lines that demarcate the quarter, we're going to measure about a third of the distance and mark that. Printer paper is about 21 centimeters, so we can mark at 7 centimeters. And we're going to cut along that longer distance, so 14 centimeters in this case, until we get a shape that looks kind of like an M or a zigzag pattern. Now, all we got to do is pick a side to be the face, and then consistently fold down at each of the ends of the cut to get this zigzag pattern. At the very top, we'll fold that over in the back to make something that can hold the rope, and there we have it. That's our Shide.